Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have a real pleasure to be here once again in European Parliament, and I'm supposed to talk about Russia, as Fred already introduced me. And I'm going to do it. As you can see, I have this little presentation with the title Economic Freedom and Economic Growth in Russia over the last almost 3 decades. If you really need to know the state of the Russian economy and the basic fact of the economic history in Russia over the last 3 decades, you need to know only one slide. Once again, you don't need to read many pages, many books, no. Just you need to know one slide. I will show you right now, please. This one. This will give you whole story for the last 3 decades. 3 distinctive periods in economic history of Russia. Each of them almost 10 years. The first period almost slightly less, 9 years. After that, slightly more than 10 years, and again is about 10 years. 3 very distinct periods. The first one is a contraction that was continued for 9 years in a row. We can call it the Great Depression or Great Recession or Long Recession, whatever you like. Contraction of GDP in Russia was 45% during 9 long years. We know that in the United States, Great Depression was for 4 years, and the overall cumulative contraction was 28.5%. You can compare these 4 years and 25.5%, which everybody knows as Great Depression in the United States, and Russia's Great Depression, minus 45% for 9 years in a row. That's the first period. Another period that started in July, August year 2008 until September year 2000, from September 98 to July 8, slightly more than 10 years. Period of unprecedented economic growth in Russia. For 10 years, less than 10 years, Russian GDP doubled. As you can see, 99.7% in increase in GDP. Just doubling GDP within 10 years, it's been called in economic literature as economic miracle. And last 10 years, almost 10 years, virtually no growth. Increase in GDP only 2.3%. for 10 years in a row. So you can have a just snapshot of the 3 distinctive periods in the Russian economic history, and now we can ask a question, how it can be explained. That's actually the textbook case. You can put in any economic textbooks to explain what works and what does not work. If you would like to have economic growth, what you need to do, or if you would like to destroy economic wealth, what you could do. Not necessarily need to do, but okay, what you could do. Okay, since I participated in some economic policy implementation in Russia for some period of time, let me explain what has been done by my predecessors, by myself and our team, and what has been done after that. Please, next slide. That's this first period that I was talking about. This is for almost 9 years, since late 1989, beginning 1990, until August, September 98. It was this long recession. That was expanding of government. It was in 92, government expenditure increased up to 70% of GDP. Just you would not find any other country in the peacetime that would increase expenditure so much. Inflation was 2,600% per year. It was expansion of debt, it was currency crisis and so on. This was destruction of what has been said already and was presented, destruction of economic freedom. So, and for all these long 9 years, me, myself, as well as many other people were thinking what should be done, what can be done to reverse the situation, how to stop economic decline and how to start economic growth. And we were looking for different options, for different economic policies. Fortunately for me, in 1996, I stumbled to the book. Could you please show me this book? This is a little book which I recommend strongly to everyone. This is the first edition of this book, which since then is being published regularly on annual basis. It's a book, Economic Freedom of the World, 1975-1995, written by this group of people. And this project has been led for many years by Mike Walker, who spoke already here from the beginning of our session, which devoted all this attention to economic freedom, elements of economic freedom, policies that could be based on economic freedom index. We studied this book as well. We studied some our stuff. And we drafted program of economic policy applied to Russia, what can be and should be done to reverse this economic decline. Could you please show next slide? Okay, this is a very short and very simplified version of the ingredients of economic freedom index and economic freedom. What does it mean? It means low taxes, low government expenditure, low size of non-market sector, absence of monopolies, guarantees of property rights, equal level playing field, monetary stability, freedom of contracts with the outside world. Some other stuff, but you can refer to the book, you can look on this and you will find more detailed explanation. So we based our program of economic policy based on this understanding of economic freedom. And when I became, in year 2000, economic advisor of the Russian president, so we devised policy exactly following to expand economic freedom in Russia. One of the most fascinating elements of economic freedom, look on this, number 1 and number 2, low taxes and low government expenditure. In the economic jargon, it has been called size of government, not absolute size of government, but relative size of government. Relative size of government expenditures as a share of GDP, relative size of taxes as a share of GDP. And I found this is probably one of the most important ingredients, elements of economic freedom. We just looked into the relation between size of government, measured as the share of government expenditures in GDP, with economic growth for some countries. Can we look for the side? First of all, we just did it for the United States of America. You can see on the horizontal line, government expenditures as a share of GDP, on the vertical GDP growth rates for 67 years, from 1950 to year 2016. And you see each of these dots is just 1 year. And this line is a correlation, it's just showing negative correlation between the size of government, which is government expenditure here, and the economic growth. So you can see that in the upper left corner, you have a very high position. This is years in the 1950s when the US economy grew by around 8% per year. And there was some kind of very low economic growth or even negative growth with much higher size of government. We were quite fascinated that, okay, it's so clear negative correlation between size of government and economic growth for the United States. And we decided to check whether this rule can work in some other countries. Here, America, now we move to Europe. Here, Germany, one of the largest economies in Europe. Okay, we found this is same negative correlation, but the coefficients even stronger, R-square even higher. So that is why this relation even stronger than in the United States. The higher you have size of government, the lower economic growth. The best period in German economic history, German economic miracle of 1950s and 1960s on the left upper corner of this graph. So Germany decided not to have more economic miracles, so they moved to the right and down. Okay, well, this is Europe. Let's look in Asia. This is Japan. Same story, negative correlation. And once again, on the left upper corner, we can see Japanese economic miracle of 1950s, 1960s, first half of 1970s. And now, okay, Japanese, okay, some kind of sick person of Asia with meager economic growth. So looks like this rule works for developed economies, whether it works for less developed economies, let's say for transition economies. Let's have a look. Oh, it's actually, first of all, it's for all OECD countries, not only for these three. All OECD, just move one back, these OECD economies for whatever, how many, six decades, you can see all these countries, same negative correlation. The best performers, Japan in the 60s, Spain in the 60s on the left upper corner, and not so good down and to the right. So which means that, okay, 1 percentage point increase in the share of government spending in GDP was accompanied with about 0.1% decline in average annual GDP growth rate. Okay, this is very clear for developing economies. Let's move to transition economies. Okay, this is data for 27 countries, same relations. Let's move further. It's just now for each of some transition economies that are Lithuania, this we're talking about, negative correlation. Next one. Latvia, negative correlation. Estonia, negative correlation. Georgia, negative correlation. Kazakhstan, negative correlation. Ukraine, negative correlation. Russia, same, negative correlation. So when we started this situation, it was certainly not all this data available because it was a little bit further before. So that is why, but we understood that size of government is a main obstacle for economic growth. That is why we implemented this policy to reduce taxation, and we have implemented a very comprehensive taxation reform with abolition of number of taxation, with reducing the tax rate, introduction of flat tax rate of 13% for personal income. We introduced labor reform, land reform, pension reforms, deregulation, demonopolization, integration of Russia, international economy, and so on. What was the result of these policies that we have implemented? Look at this graph. After decline by 45% in the previous 9 years, next 10 years was period of outstanding economic growth, on average 7% per year. That continues up to July year 2008. Unfortunately, in August year 2008, as everybody remembers, and as will reminded by our colleagues, Russian government started aggression against Georgia, and it was period was then the Russian government and Kremlin decided to change even approach to economic policy, and since then there was no expanding of economic freedom. It was a stagnation in economic freedom, and after that it was a reversal of these policies. Yes, as you can see what happened with GDP in the remaining 10 years. Overall, for these 10 years, GDP in Russia grew by only 2.3%. It just kind of lost 10 years. All right, so that is why you remember, if you'd like to increase economic growth in any country, United States, Japan, Germany, Russia, Lithuania, any country, if you like to have economic growth, you would expand economic freedom, you would contract, you would reduce size of government. If you'd like to do something different, you would do different. Let's look in Europe for a couple of moments. Okay, see, look at this graph, which is constructed based on Angus Madison database. You see that GDP per capita in the 15 EU core countries as a percentage of the world was increasing constantly until year 2000, from 15th century. It started to contract over the last 16 years, and now it is almost in the same level as it was century and 16 years ago. So what lies behind this relative contraction in position of Europe versus the rest of the world? The main reason is not only, but main reason is the expansion of government, size of government in Europe. As you can see, it's a substantial increase in government expenditures as a share of GDP over the last 7 decades. And after that, stabilization of this level, or more or less around level 50% of GDP. So let's look how Europe stands versus two main competitors, United States and China. Economic growth in Europe over the last, 26 years is only 1.6% per year. It is much higher in the United States, is incomparably high in China. What is the main reason behind this? Different size of government. Europe has much larger size of government than United States, than China. That's one of the most important explanations why Europe is lagging behind. Okay, and we can see not only for this picture, not only for the whole Europe, but for some groups of European countries. Here, two groups of European countries with high and low size of government. Each group has 5 countries. In the first group, with high size of government, France, Denmark, Finland, Belgium, and Austria. In the second group, with low size of government are Great Britain, Cyprus, Luxembourg, Ireland, and Switzerland. As you can see, second group of countries has, on average, size of government roughly 14 percentage points lower than the first group. Let's have a look what is the difference in economic growth. It has 1.6 percentage points higher growth GDP annually. So which means that each additional 10 percentage points of size of government means minus 1% annual GDP growth for European countries. Okay, so last conclusion would be inverse correlation between size of government, economic growth for European economies is confirmed again, as for many other economies. Economic decline is a price that European countries is paying for excessive size of their governments, and sustaining excessive size of governments, lack of economic freedom present the most serious challenge to the economic position of Europe in the world. Thanks.